Good afternoon, everyone. I welcome you into second session of this webinar on agriculture market reforms and market intelligence. We had a wonderful inaugural session in the presence of Dr. P.K. Joshi and Dr. R.C. Agrawal, DDG Education, and Dr. Prabhat Kumar. This afternoon, we have two very eminent speakers with us. First of all, I would like to introduce you to Dr. Smita Sirohi, who is Advisor, Agriculture and Marine Products at the Embassy of India in Brussels, Belgium. Prior to this, she was heading the Department of Dairy Economics, Statistics and Management at NDRI Karnal. And her research areas include climate change and policy issues, sustainability assessment, international trade aspects, dairy industry, infrastructure, rural development, employment, and poverty. She has done extensive work in these areas and is an expert in these fields. She has been consultant to several organizations, both national and international, of repute. Some of her notable research accomplishments are related to smallholder dairy production systems in underdeveloped production environments, national initiative on climate resilient agriculture, developing standardized methodology and estimates for various dairy production systems, performance appraisal of dairy products and manufacturing enterprises in India, US dairy support programs, Trade Policy Division, Ministry of Commerce, Government of India, impact assessment of agriculture research and development, and other projects. Besides all this, a researcher par excellence and consultant, she is also an excellent teacher and has been associated with the teaching of one of the toughest courses that I believe in agricultural economics, econometrics and advanced econometrics, and has hands-on experience in the methodological issues. She has many MSc and PhD candidates to her credit and has been also associated with several projects. She has been awarded at different levels, and among which are the Best Paper Award that has been published in Indian Journal of Dairy Science, Guest Researcher Fellowship 2004 awarded by International Climate Policy Division of Hamburg Institute of International Economics, Hamburg, Germany, Member Expert Committee Commonwealth Fellowships, and Member of Planning Commission Subgroup Credit and Livestock Insurance 12th Plan Working Group on Animal Husbandry and Dairying. With several patents and technologies and methodology, genetic stocks, variety, etc. to her credit. I'm so very happy to have you, Smita ma'am, with us on board today. And ladies and gentlemen, students and faculty members, she would be talking about the exports of foods of animal origin under changing scenario. Over to you, Smita ma'am.
Thank you, Ritambra. Thanks for the kind words. And I hope I keep up to the expectations which you have built up in this brief CV. Now, I'll straight away go and share my screen. Is it possible now?
Yes, ma'am, please
okay,
do.
Okay. It says host a disabled screening. Can you just enable me?
Yeah.
So everybody, greetings from Brussels. And we have a very good controlled situation of COVID here. So we are more fortunate in that case. And we have also resumed work. So just to brief you on that, for that, you know, that there are hopes. Soon you will also be out of this very difficult circumstances. Okay, so here we go. Yeah. So today, basically, I'll be talking to you on the export of animal source foods and what are the challenges ahead. I have not kept it very methodological, this presentation. We can always talk about methodology in terms of if you have questions. I have tried to, you know, give you a kind of overview of what is the situation and bring to light some of the interesting issues which I perceive in my new role as advisor of agriculture and marine products here as trade advisor. So I would just like to flag some of those issues, which in fact, as a researcher, even I was not really much aware of. But when I came in this, then I saw that, you know, what are the ground realities and what are the things which are really important, which is the message which I want to take back home. Okay, so can you see the screen clearly, or do I need to make certain adjustments? Okay, so this very quickly, the scheme of presentation. First, we are just going to talk about, when I say animal source foods, that what is the consumption, what is being consumed, and how much is being consumed, just to give you an idea that what is it which is on plate. Then we talk about imports, that where are the markets. So obviously, when we are thinking in terms of increasing our exports, we ought to know that where are the markets which would be of relevance for us. And then the next thing which will come about is for exports. What is that India can supply, or what is it that can be supplied in future? What can we do about it? And then challenges, at what lies ahead. So these are the four things. And I will very strictly keep to time, because you have another very important speaker waiting, Dr. Raka Saxena. So I will just take exactly my half an hour, which is allotted to me. Now, when we come to animal sources of food and diet, we just look at this. This is something which it is very well known. All of you are well aware that over the years, dietary preferences are changing. The developing countries are moving towards more high value foods, that is fruits and vegetables, and certain sorts of animal protein. But just look at this, that in Northern America, in parts of Northern America, Europe, developed countries, most of these proteins, they are coming from animal source foods. And in animal source foods, here it's taking into account everything: fish and aquatic food, milk, and all these meat products, eggs, etc. Whereas, of course, in the developing countries, most of our food is coming from the vegetable based sources. Now, here the important thing is, what you can see is that aquaculture, this we will highlight later also, that aquaculture is a very important source of food in the Southeast Asian countries, China, and parts of Europe and North America. Just very quickly looking at what is the per capita level of beef and buffalo milk meat consumption. Of course, we know that this is more prominent in Oceania, the Southern America, and the North American countries, and of course Europe. But whereas in terms of per capita consumption, there is very little consumption as far as of beef is concerned in Africa, and of course the East Asian countries. The egg consumption. So egg consumption, so we are talking about, we can see that 18 kgs per person per day. So this is the kind of situation in Mexico, and then parts of, the Northern Europe, especially Russia, China. So these are the markets, these are the pockets which have very important high level of consumption of eggs. Milk consumption, yes, of course, in India, our consumption of milk and milk products has increased very substantially, but still, if we look at the world averages, we are still lower than the world average, where in North America, and these are the areas where we have high dairy-based diets, but that is not for liquid milk, that is more for value-added dairy products, particularly cheese products. Now, seafood, coming to the seafood consumption, as we had seen earlier in the first slide, we had seen that, seafood is a very important source of animal protein. And here in seafood, Europe is really one of the hub where a lot of seafood is consumed. And in fact, if we see that over the years, what is happening is that the dietary preferences, when they're changing, there is a lot of move towards giving away red meat, and red meat is being increasingly substituted by the seafood. So broadly, just synthesizing what we have talked about is the regional food preferences. So when we say regional food preferences for beef, as I said, it's North America, South America, Oceania, and EU. Pork, I did not show you the graph or the map for pork, but pork and poultry meat is also, catching up very fast, and particularly in Africa. So Africa, we'll find, is one place where, there is a very high growth of demand in poultry meat. And pork is also catching up fast in EU. The demand, instead of beef, they are substituting more towards pork. So this is the kind of scenario. Now, when we talk about, this is the existing scenario, but what is going to happen in the future? You know that diets are changing. So now diets are not only changing from, in the developing countries, they are not only changing from cereals to high value crops, fruits and vegetables, but within the livestock derived foods also there are changes which are taking place, which are reflected here. Now, in the livestock derived foods, as you can see, this is the existing scenario. Now, when we say where are the markets, so on some of these countries, already the per capita consumption levels are pretty high. So there's not much scope that there will be more diversification or more intensification of diet towards animal-based proteins. But where this changes will come up, here you can see the dark colors. You see Africa is one continent which is really evolving, and also the Latin American countries. And of course, we have China and India. So these are the countries, where the changes are of much higher magnitude, whereas the countries which are traditionally already consuming high level of livestock derived foods, the expected changes in future are likely to be much less, as in case of Europe. But this is, please remember, this is only for livestock derived foods. It does not include seafood. Now, again, just to synthesize in a more clear way, that you can see this, you see this is in 2010, 11, 10 to 12, and in 2022, here you will not find, much changes. But when we come to the demand in the rich world is almost satiated. But when we come to the developing countries, you can see there is a lot of gap between what is the existing level of consumption and what is the future demand. So where do the markets lie? The markets basically lie as far as developing countries are there, not further in the developed countries. Again, just to emphasize that further, if you see in case of Africa, you can find that you can just look at the growth rates. What kind of growth rates are expected between 2005-7 to 2050, which is a very robust demand which is going to come forth. So this is one important segment, which will be, Africa will be one of the future markets for products which can be sourced from India. And interestingly, it's not only the demand is growing, but they do not have sufficient, trade balance, sufficient production at home. So you can see that their net trade for most of these commodities, you can see the net trade is negative. That means Africa will be a net importer of the livestock-based food products. And you can see this 2050, you can see for milk particularly the kind of negative trade balance which is projected there. So this is one of the main markets which India could probably look for. Now, dairy import share in national consumption, again, as I said, milk will be very important. Now, if you just get an overview of through this graph, you will find that this is, how much is the percentage share of imports in consumption. In 2015 also, they are very much dependent on imports. Around, in certain areas from 60, more than 50% of their demand is basically coming from 50% of their consumption is coming in terms of imports of dairy products, whereas India, of course, we know is quite self-sufficient in dairy products. Now coming to seafood, but when we see seafood demand, as I said earlier also, is coming forth more in the developed countries like EU, US, Japan. You can see this is the kind of, these are the top seafood importing countries in terms of value over a period of time. So the most and the trade, you can see it's roughly close to around 29 billion US dollars per annum in 2017. This is the magnitude of imports. Although EU is surrounded by North Sea and there's sea all sides, so they have a good amount of production also themselves, but still, given the very magnitude of their demand, their imports are really massive. And similarly for US. Okay, now what is India exporting? Let us have a very brief look at, what are the trends as far as India is concerned for these animal source foods. This is basically we have taken from FAO, and FAO does not give information on seafood exports. So we have a separate table for seafood exports. Now, over the years, as we know, meat and meat preparations, this is the major commodity in our export basket. Followed by, you can see in terms of followed by milk, and then dairy products and eggs. Now, over the years, you see, the export basket has not really diversified a lot in the sense that, meat and meat preparations still continue to hold the fort. I mean, this is the maximum amount which is there. And here we are basically sending our products to the Middle East countries because, we have very strict SPS requirements, which I'm going to deal later part of the lecture, whereby our exports cannot be, and any case, the developed countries, they already have sufficient amount of meat and meat products as domestic production, so they are not too much dependent on imports. So this is the kind of scenario, and we have made a tremendous, we have come a long way, starting only from $941,000 to, you can say, around $44 billion at present. So this is the amount of total trade which is there. Now, in seafood also, incidentally, India is among the top 10 seafood. In fact, it is the top fourth seafood exporting country, and for seafood exports alone we have around 6.5 billion US dollars is our seafood export in 2017. So here you can see, if you compare to the previous slide, if you look at all the total amount of I'll just go to the previous slide. If we see here in these terms, we have around a trade of $4.3 billion, which is there for all the products. But if you look at seafood alone is more than what we are exporting for all the other livestock products. So tremendous potential as far as India is concerned when we come to the seafood exports. Now, these are some of the recent trends that was data was till 2015. Now here we see 2019-20, so 3-year averages we see. But there is a trend, there is a slight decline. You can see over the years, in past 3 years, decline is taking place in our exports of meat and meat preparations, and even for seafood as compared to 2017-18, our exports have come down. These 19-20 figures, particularly, you see this also covers March 2020, and in March 2020, because of COVID disruptions, that effect is actually here. And when we come to the section on COVID, I will just tell you that what kind of drop we have seen in certain products. So, but nevertheless, there is between 18-19, it's kind of balanced, but compared to 2017, this has dropped down. And what could be potential reasons for this is something, which I have some idea about that, but we'll see about it. Okay. Now, when we come to production, see, whenever we talk about exports, we essentially have to see that whether we have the exportable surplus or not. So in terms of exportable surplus, you can see that, our demand, our production of milk has been increasing very steadily from 165 million tons to approximately 188 million tons. So production for all the commodities, particularly for eggs, you can see there is a robust growth in the production. So production wise, we are doing fairly well, but then of course we have a large domestic demand also. But then nevertheless, given the domestic demand for fish and fish products, for aquatic products, and also for eggs, there are exportable surplus. For milk, there are certain issues which we will come to subsequently. Now, when we talk about challenges, you see, one of the important challenges is that we have seen when we talk about where are the markets, we say that, well, markets are in Africa, markets are in the developing countries. But you see, one of the challenges is to tap the high value markets, because same commodity, if you're exporting to different markets, it does not fetch you the same value. So this is just one table, for example, I have given you. This is export of shrimps and prawns, which is the HS code 030617. And this is the unit value realization in different markets. So there is a lot of demand for our seafood products in the Southeast Asian countries also, and in the neighboring country of Sri Lanka. But you see the kind of difference which we have in the unit value realization between the developed countries and the developing countries is really phenomenal. You see, coming from 8.78 to 5.56 in Taiwan. So what does it mean? It means that when the exporters, the target should be to get the maximum value. You see, ultimately you are going to make so much same amount of efforts. You have to produce a particular commodity, then you have to take care of all the logistics, you have to export that. So when you're exporting, it is always a good business sense to export to those markets where you are going to get high value of your products. So this is something of important challenge, and as a researcher it would be really nice if this kind of inputs can be given to the various exporters or to the policymakers, that what are the markets where you are getting high value for your products. So this is so that they can also target their production, so that they can target their exports. Now coming to the very important issue of SPS compliance. Now SPS compliance, as we know, is really a issue, and we have been talking a lot about this, that we may compete in quantity, we may compete in prices, we may not be competing in terms of quality. And now here I will also like you to take you to some kind of important dimensions which as I said, I was not aware of before I joined this job. So I thought I'll just take you to this. Otherwise the usual SPS compliance challenges is something which everybody kind of is aware of. You know that we say we don't have the quality products. Now let us see this. Aquaculture products in the EU market, these are really Achilles' heel for us. Why? Now let me just link this, and I'll just show you the kind of border rejections which have taken place over the years. Now you see the European Union has a very good system of rapid alert system for food and feed, and here you can see the kind of consignments. This is the data which I have taken only from 2017 to till yesterday. And you can see the amount of consignments. More than 400 consignments have been rejected. Just see, this is the listing. So overall, the value is very high. Sorry, I'm sorry. This is not 400 consignments. That was another file. But this is what are the reasons? The reasons, as you can see, is prohibited substances, neutrophorons. This is a very important reason. Again and again, we are getting these problems of prohibited substances. Neutrophorons are being used in the aquaculture. This is for aquaculture I'm talking about. Now, this has a cascading effect. What happens is that whenever, a ban takes place in one of the companies, then more and more stringent measures are put on all the exports. Like, for instance, the sampling frequency increases from 10% to 50%. That means, the exporters have to bear additional cost of getting their products tested. The new establishments, they do not get listed. That means anybody who wants to export, EU says, no, we don't want to, you have a very bad SPS compliance record. We do not want products from any new enterprises. The enterprises get delisted. If there are repeated non-compliance results, then a particular enterprise, they will just delist the enterprise. So it is not that anybody can export. There has to be, the process is that there has to be a residue monitoring plan, which is called, the National Residue Monitoring Plan, that has to be registered. That every year we have to submit, the Export Inspection Council has to submit this, that this is how we are controlling our residues. This is how we are going to manage our residues. These particular antibiotics, these particular veterinary medicines will be tested in our consignments. So there is a full-fledged plan. Once EU approves that plan, then the second thing comes is then the establishments are listed. It is not that anybody can export. There has to be approved establishments only can export to EU. And once we get these kind of problems, as you can see, these kind of substances, then we have also problems of, you can see, cold chain maintenance. So as a result of that, what is done? The entire consignment is disrupted. And that is a very heavy loss. So all these are neutrophorons, but then there are certain other problems also which are there. So you see, and Vanami shrimps, incidentally, is one of the very important product. This is one important product which we're exporting very in large quantities to EU. So this kind of thing, when it happens, this has a lot of cascading effect, and in turn, what is the problem is that we are not able to increase our exports to any of these developed markets, and which we have seen that EU is one of the top markets as far as fishery products are concerned. Then the problem is not only for aquaculture products. You see, so whenever our farmers, what is this problem of actually neutrophorons? What they do is they inject, they are using certain antibiotics so that the growth of the animal, growth of the shrimp is faster. So, good manufacturing, good production practices are really, really important. Otherwise, they damage our image as a reliable supplier of any kind of a product. Now, the problem is not only for the aquaculture products, but problem is also there for the sea cod fishery because of the water pollution. Because of the water pollution, there is uh, high residues of cadmium in the ship, in these consignments. And because of these cadmium consignments, as you can see, there is official detentions and their withdrawal from the markets. And this is the problem which our poor fish farmers have to face. And you know that in our country, we have thousands and thousands, millions of fishermen who are dependent on their livelihood from fish farming. So if exports can boost, then only their ultimately their livelihoods can also improve. But how do we do that? So this is the kind of scenario which we face. Now, this is the situation not only in case of European Union, but even there are a lot of consignment rejections of the top Indian brands and also aquaculture products which are taking place in the US markets. Very quickly, just to share some of this data with you, as far as these US markets are concerned, you see, if I take the consignments of fish, so you can see this is how many consignments have been rejected. Now, this was the figure of, as I said, more than 400 consignments you can find. See, such a long list of consignments getting rejected. So this is really eye-opening, the kind of consignments which are getting rejected for different reasons because of non-compliance of SPS, and what are the states which are involved here. Now, not only for fish, but also for other products. If you see that even some of our consignments, even for most reputed companies like Mother Dairy and all, the consignments are rejected of milk flavored. In EU markets, these are not even allowed. Milk products are not allowed. In US markets, it are allowed. Things from Haldiram Snacks Private Limited and all. So even reputed companies, they are not actually, in some way, they are skipping this. They are not really taking into account that we have to take high compliance measures. Now, these are the photographs, which are often you will find. This is not a photograph from India, but this was in one of the presentations made by somebody I know. He presented this as an Indian photograph, and I said, sorry, this is not an Indian photograph, that livestock and humans sharing the same water sources. But this is the kind of propaganda which is taking place, and that is why, our exports, that is going to shake the consumer's confidence in our structure. This is an African photograph, but very honestly, we also know that this could have been an Indian photograph also. We also have similar kind of a situation. Now, when we are coming to price competitiveness, in price competitiveness, well, there is cost of production which is rising over the years. And if you see that in case of milk, we used to very proudly say that, well, India is one of the least cost producing country. But over the years, the cost of production has really increased. And now this is in 2017, where you will find that India's cost of production is in the same range as that of, you can see, America and parts of, similar kind of a thing, 30 to 40. In this range, you will find in Oceania and so many other countries. So we have really lost our advantage as a low cost producing country. Now, the third important challenge is when we talk about trade negotiations. In trade negotiations, what happens is, whenever we open our trade negotiations, regional, and that now that WTO is almost, negotiations in the WTO is almost stopped. So there are more and more regional negotiations which are coming up. Now, in these regional negotiations, often, from the perspective of livestock products, our negotiators are very ill prepared. So they really do not know that what is the kind of, how do we negotiate tariffs? We are just kind of showing you as an example. This is the work which was carried out by my PhD student, that in case of IFTA, that was India ASEAN Free Trade Agreement, we negotiated for our Indian dairy products. But what we negotiated, like out of the 10 countries, the product lines which we negotiated for the 7 countries was on those product lines where we were any case not exporting dairy products. So we did not get any advantage. You see, so what are the product lines which you want to negotiate? You negotiate those product lines where you are going to get some advantage. So this is an exercise which has to be done before that, a post exercise is, once the once a particular trade agreement is sealed, then you can't renegotiate that. So it has to be done previously, that what are the product lines where you must negotiate, where you can get an advantage. So here you see, despite of such a high hype which was created that we are going to boost, there is tremendous demand of dairy products in Southeast Asian countries, we did not benefit from that because we negotiated on the tariff lines where we did not have any concern. Now, another thing very quickly I'll go through is the environmental sustainability concerns which are coming up, which is one of the challenge. There is a lot of talk about the carbon footprints. In fact, the European Green Deal has also talked about, they may in future think about carbon border adjustment tax. So these are some of the concerns which we should understand, that in the tomorrow or in distant future it might happen, since some kind of taxation will be there on high carbon. So we have to be efficient in our production process. Similarly for water footprints. Now, if you will just, I will just show you that in water footprints, you see, these are the product lines which we are exporting, which are the top product lines. And just to say that how much is the water use in these product lines, very high intensity of water use in all these product lines. But what is more worrying is, you see, in production of bovine and sheep meat, India is 53% higher than the global average. You see, our water consumption is 53% higher than the global average. So all these figures, they show what is the percentage of Indian consumption vis-a-vis the global average. So everywhere we find that, our consumption of water is very, very high compared to the global average. And this makes our water footprint very, very high for all these commodities. And why I'm raising this issue is because all these things will somehow tomorrow come up as a part of environmental sustainability, and that could hamper our export process. And then we have, of course, the antimicrobial resistance. Antimicrobial resistance is new regulations are coming up around the world, where the world is thinking that we are going to ban those veterinary medicines which lead to antimicrobial resistance. And so India will have to, think about a way in which we can also take care of health of animals, of human health, and as far as also we can, take care of our trade concerns. Then another thing which I just wanted to flag was the illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing, IUU fishing regulations. Now, IUU fishing, India is a signatory to IUU regulation, and we are not supposed to be overtapping our sea resources. We are a signatory to that, and our compliance record has been fairly good till now. But these are some of the upcoming regulations, or in fact, I would say upcoming concerns around the world, which are going to be the drivers for trade in future. Sorry. Oh, sorry, I'm so sorry. Okay. Very quickly, let me go down to my last slide. I'm sorry for this mess up. Yeah. Now coming to finally the last but second slide. Now, of course, we know that the challenges which we are already facing have been compounded by COVID-19. The demand is gone down very substantially over the years, and our trade data for the period April, we also have access to data for the period of April that has shown a slump of 60% compared to the previous month. So this is the kind of situation which we are facing. The global supply chains have got disrupted very badly. So this is an additional challenge which one has to face and see that how these global supply chains can be maintained. And we are also trying to work on that, what can be the potential, how we can work on, substituting these supply chains, maintaining these supply chains. Now, from the research point of view, just the last bit, I just want to tell my young researchers that these are some of the areas in which, we really want information, or the government really wants information. One is the trade costs and behind the border issues. Now, behind the border issues, we want some intensive research which can bring out that what are these behind the border issues. Like, for instance, when I was just showing you this RASIF alerts, that how the consignments are getting rejected, what are the the things which are happening, and as a result of that, how much the cost goes up. So if this kind of issues can be flagged continuously by the researchers and they can be published intensely, then this is going to catch the attention of the policymakers in a more prominent way. Then another point where we want research support is the commodity value chains in competing countries. You see, often I have seen that the studies which are carried out in India are more focused only on India rather than taking an international perspective in mind. So that international perspective is very important. Just try to understand that how the competing countries have organized their value chains. What are the learning lessons which we can take from them? Because you see, in so many countries, for example, smaller countries like Vietnam, etc., they are our big competitors for several of these animal sourced foods. Now, how those countries are able to, compete and still maintain a value chain, a very competitive value chain, these are some of the things which one can derive. And then can we think about substituting their, I mean, what are the strategies which they are following? What can be our strategy so that we can take their place in the markets. So this is an international perspective which I would request my young researchers to bring in. And the last one, there can be several things for research support, but I have just focused on few points. And another thing is the regional trade negotiations, which I have already talked to you about, that in the regional trade negotiations, we need to do a lot of these ex-ante exercises where we see that, since if we are thinking of negotiating, we should do we should find out that, you see, if you do this kind of negotiations, this is what you are going to gain. So this will be an additional, because when policies are formulated at the government level, I have somehow they have been privy to kind of negotiations which are going on. But what we find is that that's a whole lot of a different story. I cannot discuss those regional trade negotiations at this platform. But the message is, this kind of empirical support, if it is available from the researchers, it is very useful for the negotiating process. So that's all from me. I hope I have not exceeded my time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. You utilize the time so very efficiently. Thank you again. And as I see that you have extensively covered the foods of animal origin, and especially highlighting the problems part and the researchable issues, I believe that the audience is going to be really benefited from this, and we'll take up the questions later on after we are done with both the discussions. Dear students, faculty members, and gentlemen, we have another today, Dr. Agriculture and Technology. Before joining ICAR NIAP, she served the premier ICR National Dairy Research Institute, Karnal, and GB Pant University as a faculty member. She is presently working on the project on doubling of farmers' income in the country and has extensively contributed to the Doubling Farmers' Income Report as well. She has many research publications, including journal articles, books, policy papers, working papers to her credit. She has worked as consultant to many organizations like Ministry of Commerce, ICRIER, OECD, France, etc. She has been associated with leading professional associations as member and office bearer and received awards for research contributions. Besides this, she has an extensive work in the field of market intelligence. And today, here, I would like her to invite and talk about price volatility and market intelligence. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Ritambara, for introducing me. First of all, I would like to thank Anand Agricultural University for giving me this opportunity to come and share my thoughts on this very important topic on market intelligence and price volatility. And I'm very fortunate to share this dais with my very respected colleague, Dr. Smita Sirohi. She was my senior at NTRI, and we are in touch. I'm continuously getting her guidance on many areas. So now I would come back to my topic on market intelligence and price volatility. I would like to share with you the lessons which we have learned from a network project on market intelligence, which we have implemented during the previous plan period, that is 2013 to 2017. Coming to the genesis of market intelligence, the market intelligence efforts are not new in India. We know that. The genesis of this market intelligence started as early as in 1954 on the recommendations of Agricultural Price Inquiry Committee. And based on that, number of market intelligence units were established in the Directorate of Economics and Statistics in 14 different states. And then those units were providing the information on prices and other intelligence parameters, but the efforts were somehow not very continuous kinds. Then Government of India in early 2000 started a huge network for providing the market information to the stakeholders. It was ECMARKnet. This network, this portal provided the information on daily market prices, arrivals, and other useful information on government schemes and government programs related to marketing to the farmers, traders, and other stakeholders. Then, utilizing this information into some usable format and usable form, there was a project which was started by Tamil Nadu Agricultural University in 2004, and this was funded by National Agricultural Innovation Project. And this university did excellent work and disseminated commodity price forecast for the benefit of farmers. Following that, we started this network project on market intelligence at our institute, that is ICR, National Institute of Agricultural Economics and Policy Research, and implemented this for a planned period. And now institutions like Anand Agricultural University and even this Ministry of Food Processing Industries, they have started market intelligence units for providing the useful information on prices to the farmers. We started this project to provide the short-term price forecast to farmers, and also we conducted some very useful policy studies to get some insights on price transmission and price volatility that could have impact on price forecast. This project was a kind of pan-India project which covered 13 important states of the country. And we started from this Kashmir to Kerala. We covered 13 states, and we ended this project with 14 institutions throughout the country. Now, when we talk about the market intelligence per se, the first and very important question is that which commodities should be covered under this market intelligence. Now, when we talk about certain commodities which have very strong government interventions and mechanisms which are already there in the domain, in the purview, and are working very effectively. So, I mean, the emphasis should be to capture more of high-value commodities which can have serious and critical impact on the farmer's income. So we provided due emphasis on high-value commodities, especially the fruits, vegetables, dry fruits, plantation crops, and we covered more than 40 commodities under this market intelligence project, and more of such commodities provided impetus for providing this useful information to the farmers. So when we talk about this intelligence, this process of intelligence, what could be the right procedure for developing forecast? The procedure is that, first of all, we have to select markets, the prominent markets for any particular commodity, and then we have to collect the historical data on price. Now, the immediate question would be, which market? And what kind of prices? So market, it should be a very strategic kind of market, and we should have sufficient historical data which could give us reliable and precise forecast. There are a number of forecasting techniques which are available which capture both linear behavior and non-linear behavior. In linear category, we can have different variants of ARIMA. We know that ARIMA, and we can have seasonal ARIMA, we can have extended ARIMA, we can have different other variants. And then the techniques which cover more of non-linear dimensions, these belong to more of Arch and Garch family kind of techniques. And we have then artificial neural network. We can use these techniques in singly, or we can combine, we can have hybrid kind of techniques which give us more reliable forecast. Then we have to go for generating the forecast range, and we have to go for validation. Many times what's there, that the model is not giving us some kind of precise numbers, reliable numbers, because the models give higher weight to the recent price data. And sometimes we know that due to seasonality, climatic factors, and other international market factors, the prices are extremely volatile. That we have seen in case of many agricultural commodities in India, particularly tomato, onion, and potato. Sometimes we have seen this in case of pulses, sometimes in oil seeds. So the model is not giving us reliable forecast. The price precision in the forecast is not there. So what we have to do, we have to go and validate the forecast with farmers, traders, and we have to even take into consideration the stakeholders' perception for validating this forecast. Now the question comes: there are a number of shocks are there in the environment. there are climatic shocks. When we have untimely rainfall, when we have some climatic aberrations, these do have impact on the supply mechanisms, and there are shortfalls in supply. When there are these kind of shocks are there, the supply shortfalls are there, and immediate impacts are there on the price and price transmission exercise. Then we have to account for these changes. I will discuss more on these things when we come at the end, because these are the real constraints which we have to consider. Which we have to tackle over a period of time to make this system of market intelligence more effective and more efficient. Then we have to go for dissemination of forecast. Now we can quickly see that what has been the behavior of different categories, like pulses. Prices were initially, if you look at the previous decade data, prices were more or less stable in nature, but due to the recent changes in government policy, government provided due emphasis on pulses, and due to that pulse increase in pulse production by around 7 to 8 million tons, there was sudden change in, there were fluctuations in prices, and so that was reflected here in the price behavior of pulses. Prices of oilseeds, particularly rapeseed and mustard, have been quite stable over a period of time, and here we don't have much problem in forecast of such commodities which have stable nature. But when we look at onion and potato, these have been extremely volatile commodities over a period of time. And we can see in case of onion, every alternate year we have extreme price spikes, and which are actually creating problems in farmers' decision making in terms of acreage, in terms of market selection, and in terms of even these are creating huge problems for the stakeholders which are involved in these commodity supply chains. So we forecasted, and the accuracy in general was more than 90% pre-sowing. We developed two kinds of forecast: pre-sowing forecast and pre-harvest forecast. And accuracy in general was more than 90%, and particularly it was higher for pre-harvest forecast due to obvious reasons that we were quite close to the harvesting season. In case of pre-sowing, there was some distance, maybe 3 to 4 months, so that there was little. The pre-harvest forecasts were more efficient than the pre-sowing forecast. And these tables provide the individual market and individual commodity kind of precision in our forecast. In general, forecasts were more than 90%, but there were some aberrations due to some factors, some climatic changes, and some kind of bucket shocks were there, and because of that, the forecasts were not more close to 90%. So these are some market and commodity level data on pre-sowing and pre-harvest forecast. Now, how the modeling approaches change when we talk about volatility. When volatility comes into picture, our modeling approaches entirely change. When we talk about, when the price series follows a stable kind of pattern and there is some kind of linearity in prices, which many times is not there, particularly in case of agricultural commodities. So in that case, this ARIMA techniques, it can be used largely for forecasting the prices of different agricultural commodities. But when volatility is increasing and then extreme volatility is noticed in the prices, then ARIMA doesn't hold true. So in that case, what we have to do, we have to use different variants of ARIMA. Maybe we have to sometimes introduce some kind of extraneous variables in ARIMA which capture the extraneous impact of other shocks in the economy, so that our forecasts become much more efficient. And sometimes we have to go for the techniques like Arch and Garch family techniques. There are a number of models which are there. So we cannot have details on all these models at this point of time, but in future, if it is required, we can have detailed discussion on these modeling techniques, which are actually very important in market intelligence. So we go for combination of different techniques. We go for hybrid kind of techniques, which give us more reliable and precise kind of forecast. Now, in case of vegetables, you can see in case of onion, we did go for Arch and Garch techniques, and we established that this family is reducing the error over a period of time. And then if we have some kind of merging of different linear and non-linear techniques, then forecast can become more efficient and more reliable. We also try to see what was the impact of this project on farmers' behavior and then farmers' welfare. And then it was seen, it was examined that with our price forecast, the stored quantity increased, and then farmers could take advantage of that in price premium with the storage. So that advisory was given to the farmer that you can store the product and you can sell later, and then that they could fetch the premium price after the storage. So that was an added advantage to the farmer by using this information advisory given to them. And then in certain cases, there was increase in farmer share in the consumer price by using this market intelligence information. And we also did go for some kind of price transmission, co-integration analysis across commodities and across states and all, and that indicated that there was most of the markets they were integrated. It indicated that whenever we have some kind of price change in one market, it will automatically transmit to other markets with different lags and with different intensity, with different time span. So what is when we talk about, this was in brief about about our efforts in market intelligence and what lessons are important, because this NAHEP is implementing this project at Anand Agricultural University. So the team of Anand Agricultural University can look at these dimensions which are important for making this mechanism more effective and efficient. That when we talk about data, so we are using the historical price data for developing the price forecast. Now, when we look at the price data, different organizations are providing this kind of price data. We know that this EGMACnet, which is through the Ministry of Agriculture, they are giving us the wholesale price data, and for different markets, for different states, markets, and areas. And if you look at for horticultural commodities, now National Horticultural Research and Development Foundation is also publishing data on prices and arrivals. But sometimes when we look at this data, the data doesn't harmonize. There's no convergence in the data. So data is very critical in making this forecast. So whenever we have some changes in data, even one extreme value will change your entire forecast. So data convergence, we are working very seriously with Ministry of Agriculture on this dimension of data harmonization. We had a number of meetings with the EGMACnet officials so that this data could be made more user friendly, it could be made more harmonized, and more convergence is there in the data. And then when we talk about this inclusion of critical variables, for example, there are a number of shocks in the form that, there are climatic aberrations. So we should be able to incorporate this climate data, this market data, and exports. Like Madam has explained very importantly that in this about this livestock product, though we did not cover these livestock products in our forecast due to obvious reasons, but this data on exports, real-time data on exports is very important in case of agricultural commodities, in case of various crops where we have export potential, so that we can incorporate those data and see what kind of linkages are there in terms of international prices, domestic prices, climatic aberrations, and all those things. So we need to build up these more variables in our model, but we don't have data on these. We don't have weekly data. We don't have fortnightly data on exports. So if we have real-time data on exports, those variables can be captured into our modeling framework, and that can build our forecast more effective. And then, we have to go for, farmers' participation is extremely important so that they are able to wisely utilize the advisories and price signals provided to them. And then we have seen that most of the commodities like, cereals and oilseeds to some extent like rapeseed and mustard and some other commodities, they have very stable kind of behavior. So there we don't have, much edge in forecasting. But sensitive commodities like tomato, onion, potato, and those high value crops, these are the sensitive commodities where we can have higher leverage in terms of, when we have forecast of these commodities, the farmers can take more effective decisions on marketing of these sensitive commodities. Then when we talk about, these market intelligence efforts, it is actually very important that institutions like Anand Agricultural University or ICR NAHEP, we can go for this implementation of this exercise for a defined period of time. But, institutionalization of this exercise is actually very important. When state governments and state departments, they come on board and they join hands with the academic R&D institutions in that particular area so that the efforts are institutionalized. When we implemented this project, we got very good support from the state government departments of Kashmir and also from Telangana. The state governments, they provided support to the universities for institutionalization of this effort, and they are doing very good work in this area. And ultimately, IT, like, we are talking about artificial intelligence, robotics, drones, and also these, because, when we talk about advanced production estimates, so there are the use of drones, use of GPS, use of all those techniques can be very useful in terms of integrating this with our price forecast. So IT has very important application, and ultimately we can come at the end with some kind of app or some kind of web solution for providing the forecast to farmers. So this was in brief about the market intelligence. Now I would take up a case study on onion, that how this volatility was so prominent in case of onion and how this transmission process actually happened. So if we look at the prices of vegetable and pulses, these have been volatile, particularly after 2011 and 12. And we can see here, tomato, onion, and potato have been extremely volatile commodities. We have extreme price spikes in these cases. And instability has been very high. We have seen that. And this is despite the fact that we can see there has been tremendous increase in onion production, particularly after 2008-9. And this, we have not seen this there was about 12% increase in onion production during last more than 10 years. And this kind of increase has not been noticed in any other food commodities in India. And despite that, every alternate year, we have some kind of, onion price crisis. Sometimes the prices go, beyond certain limits, on both sides. And so we have extreme kind of conditions. We need to really take care of that. So if you look at the distribution of onion production, there are 5 or 6 states which are dominating the entire onion scene in the country. And these include Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, Bihar, Karnataka, Gujarat. So these are the 5 states which are very important. Onion availability, of course, has been increasing with increase in onion production. And we have been exporting around 10% of onion, which we are producing in the country. The consumption has also been increasing. We know that onion is part of our integral part of our diets, and so the consumption has been increasing in both rural and urban areas. If you look at the clustering of onion, this is one of the important dimensions which we need to actually take care. So if we look at the onion concentration, we look at these are the 5 states which are important, which are dominating entire onion scene in the country. And these occupy more than 70% share in the onion production basket. And this clustering, there has been increase in this share over a period of time. And if we look at this entire onion produced in the 85% of onion is produced in the country is channelized into food supply. 10% we are all exporting on an average, and 5% other wastages. So 85%, and we don't have much value addition and processing in case of onion. Neither the consumers they have preferences, nor such kind of activities are in vogue. Onion, we know that there has been high growth, but the commodity is extremely volatile. The area production and productivity, all these 3 are extremely volatile. Now, when we talk about why this dynamics, why this onion price crisis, so we need to understand what is actually the arrival pattern in the national scene. If we look at this, there are 2 kinds of onions: Kharif onion and Rabi onion. This Rabi onion, which is available since March, and it is harvested till April. Now this captures majority, around 60% of the total onion supply in the country, and its shelf life is around 5 to 6 months. So the entire country is fed from this Rabi onion till September or so. So this is the major, and during this span of around 6 months, we don't have onion from any part of the country. So this is, and from September onwards, we have supply of Kharif onion, which is coming from states like Karnataka is the leading supplier in case of Kharif onion. States like Telangana and they are supplying in Kharif onion. And so there we need to understand now this entire crisis is coming when we look at this entire supply chain, entire arrival distribution throughout the year. We find that this Rabi onion shortages, Rabi onion fluctuations, they are creating disturbances in the economy, because this is the part of arrival which is feeding the economy for a longer period of time, and most of it is, exports are mainly. Rabi onion is largely exported to different destinations. So this is the major thing. Now we did detailed analysis of price transmission. We selected major markets from different states. Lasalgaon, we know that it is the biggest onion market in the country. And we took other markets from other countries, Madhya Pradesh, Karnataka, Gujarat, Bihar, and we did the detailed price transmission analysis in case of onion. Now we also analyzed the structural breaks. You can clearly see here in case of onion, if we look at the price trajectory of onion, we find that over a period of time, during the last more than 30 years, we find that onion price trajectory is now extremely volatile. And these breaks, these onion price phases, these are becoming shorter and steeper. But, and this has its own implications on price stability. Now, the point which was I making that Rabi onion shortages or Rabi onion fluctuations, these have impact on entire this crisis. Now, if you look at this Rabi onion thing, this starts coming from March and continues till April. So largely this is accounted in the previous year's supply. So whenever we have shortage in the previous year's Rabi onion production, we can see clearly we have next year as its repercussion on decline in arrival and extreme changes in price. So we need to really take care of this Rabi onion basket. And this is just a snapshot of how this entire behavior is going in the biggest onion market, which is Lasalgaon. And we also applied this price decomposition in case of onion prices. We can see here how changes in price in Lasalgaon, how change in price in one market is affecting the price changes in other markets. So here in case of Bangalore, if we look at, we find that in most of the markets, its own impact is high. And which is actually very logical that a market will follow its own historical pattern. The prices will follow its own historical pattern in a given market. But we can see here the light blue colored bars here, these indicate the Lasalgaon market. And Lasalgaon has very important impact in most of the market. Lasalgaon has in its own market, we can see Lasalgaon has maximum impact. So Lasalgaon is having, the point is that Lasalgaon is a primary market, so it doesn't receive arrival from other markets. So largely the price signals are driven from its own historical behavior. But very interestingly, we can see here the Indore market, where impact of Lasalgaon is very high. So in case of Indore, over a period of time, the price signals are largely driven by Lasalgaon, which is around 350 kilometers from Lasalgaon. So around 50% variation in Indore prices is explained by changes in Lasalgaon prices. So this kind of dimension is actually very important. So Lasalgaon is a critical, very strategic market which has implication on other markets, but the markets are highly dynamic and market dynamics is changing over a period of time. Now Lasalgaon, which was having highest arrival in Maharashtra, but now Pimpalgaon market has taken over Lasalgaon and it is receiving higher arrival as compared to Lasalgaon market. So we also applied the VAR model and we can see here the objective transmission of prices, how it is happening and how markets are influencing each other. These are the results of VAR model which we applied because the price series, how much time do I have, Ritambara?
Yes, ma'am, you can take your time. Take your time, please.
Okay. So we can see here that, every market, the pattern in every market is driven by its own historical behavior. But we can see very interesting markets, for example, Patna, where impact of Lasalgaon is maximum. 1% change in price in Lasalgaon market, or 1 unit change in market price of Lasalgaon market will change the market price in Patna by around 0.41 units. So this is how the Lasalgaon becomes the most important markets affecting Patna market, and Patna becomes the next market. Otherwise, in most cases, the own impacts are maximum. So this is in case of major producing market. We can see in case of major consuming market. In most of the markets, whose own historical pattern is important, but in case of Kolkata, again we can see Lasalgaon is the most important market. And after Lasalgaon, Bangalore is the next most important market, and Kolkata becomes the third. So here we can see how how market dynamics for a particular market it changes, because it consists of arrivals from different markets, and that's how signals transmit to that particular market. Now here the deficiency is that we don't have data on inter-market commodity transactions. So we have highlighted this point to even highest authorities at BSE that we should have inter-market transaction metrics. Now we should be able to know that in Azadpur Mandi in Delhi, how much produce is coming from Rajasthan, how much is coming from Madhya Pradesh, how much is coming from Karnataka, how much is coming from Maharashtra, so that we are able to devise our strategy here, that how the transmission process will take place, that will depend upon how the arrival matrix is composed of. So this is the summary of how price influences are spreading in major consuming and producing market. But on aggregate basis, we can say 2-3 are the most important markets: Lasalgaon, Pimpalgaon in Maharashtra, and then Bangalore, which dominates entire Kharif supply. So these 2-3 markets are very important in controlling the entire price dynamics of onion in a given year for both the seasons. So these are the influences, I mean, in results of impulse response function, how prices stabilize over a period of time due to shocks in prices in other markets. So exports, we have been continuously exporting onion over a period of time, and around 2 to 3 million tons of onion is being exported every year. And Government of India, after this crisis started happening, Government of India started controlling through bans in terms of export bans, and then they also started increasing the minimum export prices of onions. So, but this Bangalore rose variety, which is largely targeted as a export-oriented variety, so its exports are continued because it is largely for export markets. So Government of India is controlling through export bans and minimum export prices, which actually impact the crisis in immediate terms. So the objective of minimum export price is to control the price spikes. So we have seen that, with the lag, this MEP is able to control the wholesale price index of onion. Now, what are the price stabilization options? This is my last slide. So the price stabilization options. Now, when we talk about onion, we can see that this Rabi onion is largely concentrated into Maharashtra, the Nasik belt, and which consists of around 60% of Rabi onion. And this Kharif is largely contributed by Karnataka. Of course, other states are also contributing. So we need to go for actually the seasonal expansion and the special expansion. Like, last year was an extreme year where we had extreme downfall in prices and extreme hike in prices. So that year was quite extreme year with both downfalls and up extremes. So we need to go for actually seasonal expansion and special expansion in case of onion cultivation. Then the Government of India is also trying to promote this value addition in processing, particularly the dried onion or dehydrated onions. But the consumers are not in favor of such kind of value-added products of onion. Consumers are preferring only the fresh varieties. So, but we can have some kind of interventions here. Ministry of Food Processing Industries, they have started this work on intelligence, and they have also started work on this value addition activities. Market surveillance is actually very important. When we talk about this Rabi onion, we know that for a particular year, we know that where was the shortfall in March and April, where was the shortfall in supply, or how the supply behaved during a particular year. That will be managed during the next span of 6 months. So we have advanced signals with us. Now, as a stakeholder, as a team of market intelligence, those price signals need to be utilized very effectively and passed on to the stakeholders for effective decision making. So the units in DAC, units in Ministry of Commerce, units in food processing industries, they need to be properly guided about these advanced signals of prices. And then government's efforts in terms of operations, greens, and the price stabilization fund, they should be properly utilized to create a stock so that those can be used in case of emergencies. And marketing reforms, obviously, now the government has started 2 big reforms in marketing. So these should contribute to, let's say, some kind of, reducing these price aberrations over a period of time, and stocking and distribution can be done more effectively. And of course, whenever we have any kind of crisis, we need to go for either exports or imports as a immediate reliance on trade. So these are the options. But most important, I think that we need to actually geographically expand the onion cultivation, and this market surveillance thing is extremely important. There should be a market intelligence cell at the central level, which should monitor this entire supply chain of onion. They should be able to utilize these price signals and immediately. Now, time is actually very important. These signals should be immediately passed on to the government bodies so that effective actions could be taken. So with this, I stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for that excellent presentation. And now we'll begin with the Q&A session. And I think it should be fine if I take it one by one. So first I would like to start with Dr. Smita Sirohi ma'am. Is that okay?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much, ma'am. So there is this first question for you, Smita ma'am.
Yeah.
So the one of the audiences has asked, will there be any impact of COVID-19 on the consumption of food of animal origin worldwide?
Okay. Should I collect all the questions and then answer? If there are any
Yes,
other
yes,
questions?
yes, yes. Yes,
Okay.
there are. So this is first question.
Okay.
Second question is, how do you see the buffalo meat market? The statistics in India or the information in India is very vague on the animal products, and how in that even the demand and supply statistics shall be maintained and the decisions should be taken basis when it comes to market intelligence. That is second
Okay.
question. And then there is another question. Export policy emphasizes upon increasing the exports. However, that remains a challenge. What do you see as the single largest challenge that affects the products of animal origin and shall be taken care of? And the
Okay.
ways to mitigate the same, in according to you.
Okay. Okay.
And
So
then there is a common, yeah,
let me
please,
just
please.
take these three first, and then I
Yeah.
can. So first one is if there is any effect of COVID-19 on. Yes, I think there is going to be an effect because you see, from the international perspective, what I feel is that there is more and more emphasis which is taking place as far as local food is concerned, particularly because there was a massive disruption of global supply chains during the COVID crisis, and which has not stopped as yet. So, fortunately, in this part of the world, uh, they had enough stocks. But had this pandemic continued for a longer time, there would have been shortages of food. So therefore, there is more and more emphasis on buying the local products, locally produced products. So in that sense, yes, I would say that they will be, once you have more, you are shifting towards the local foods, obviously exports are going to be, or the imports are going to be hampered. So I do see there is going to be a major change in which, and if this kind of a situation continues for long, particularly from the logistic point of view. The second question was demand and supply statistics as far as buffalo meat is concerned. Yeah. Now, it's not only for buffalo meat, as I would say. There is a problem in statistics, which Raka has also pointed out for crops. Like, fortunately for crops, we're supposed to have more reliable data, but then compared to livestock. But this is something which is very universal across all the products or all the agricultural products. For buffalo meat, yes, because we do not have very authentic information as far as the slaughterhouses are concerned, and there may be a lot of slaughtering which is taking place, which is illegal slaughtering kind of a thing. So from that perspective, there is a problem with statistics, supply statistics. But as far as from the academic point of view, from modeling point of view, what we have to do is, of course, we have to go by the reliable, whatever is the officially available statistics. But I would also suggest, to authenticate that, there is always a good case to come up with some primary studies. These primary studies can, in a way, validate whether these whatever is the government statistics, to what extent this is true, or not only true. We are not trying to authenticate this, but we are also trying to build up our own database using the primary statistics. I mean, this is not only for buffalo meat, I would say even for milk. I have been working in this dairy sector for such a long time, and you will find whether it's a drought year, whatever may happen, milk production will rise by a particular percentage. So, and we have dealt with very, very deeply in terms of, integrated sample survey reports, which is the basis for the milk, the data on milk. And we have seen the way these integrated sample survey reports or the data has been collected. So there is a universal problem. We understand that. So please try to come up with more kind of, primary surveys in selected regions, which could be which could kind of say that, yes, this is the data, and the official statistics is this. Well, there's a mismatch, and so what should be done? Okay, so that will also put the government agencies on toes that, well, there is somebody watching. official statistics.
Yeah.
And then the next question, which was on the single largest challenge as far as animal source food is concerned, the single largest challenge for animal source food is definitely SPS considerations. You see, even if we think that, okay, it doesn't matter, we are not really worried about SPS, we will go and export to Africa. After all, Africa is not concerned about they will not be too much concerned about the quality as compared to the developed countries. But there you see, there also we will be facing competition from the markets, from the developed country markets. So even if an African country is not, let's say it does not have too stringent SPS regulations in place, but still, if they are getting a better quality product at the same price or from a developed country, which they are sure of a quality, why should they buy from you? So the most definite challenge is the SPS measures on the quality front. There is a lot which has to be done. Well, as advisor to government of India in this position, we come across so many things which we can't even talk about, and which are really shocking, that in terms of quality how compromises are made. But what happens is, when those consignment gets rejected, everything falls flat. So I think this is one thing which government has to do very, very strictly. The traceability will be very important for animal source food. If you are able to put up traceability mechanisms for traceability, then you will be able to carve out a place for yourself in the world markets. Otherwise, no, whatever part of the world it is.
Yeah.
So any other questions?
And I think we need to make, so there is another question, I think, that is open to both of you. And after that, I'll be taking up the questions for Dr. Akash Saxena, ma'am. The question goes like this. As trade helps in price stabilization, it has its own dynamics under changing scenario. What challenges current situation can throw before market intelligence? So I think it's all about how the price stabilization, if the trade gets affected, prices are not likely to be stabilized, and how that will affect the market intelligence research. That is.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, although Raka will take this question, but let me just give a preliminary thoughts. You see, all the market intelligence models have been thrown to air as a result of this pandemic. I mean, it's not only models which have been developed by India, but world over. So this is a unprecedented crisis, which is because of the non-economic reasons, an economic crisis which is coming from the non-economic reasons. Never has after the World War, never has the world faced this kind of a situation. Yes, there will be problems as far as this is concerned, like how market intelligence will, but then this will also be a learning experience, that such kind of, extreme shocks can be incorporated into the modeling, and then how, we can think about that price stabilization. You are right, that trade leads to price stabilization. So what lies ahead in next 1 year or next 2 years time? Trade is going to be disrupted. If trade is disrupted, then domestic prices can either be too low or it could be too high, depending upon what is the kind of demand supply situation in the domestic countries. That is going to happen. And I think, it's only with time that the world will be able to cope up with it and learn to live with it.
Thank you so
Raka,
much.
you can take more on this.
Yeah. So rightly mentioned, trade is, ma'am, you have rightly mentioned that trade is very important variable in case of market intelligence. Now what we need to do, we need to build this model in our modeling framework. You have rightly mentioned. No, but we don't have real-time data on trade. Now when we talk about this intelligence effort, we go for kind of weekly data or fortnightly data, particularly in case of sensitive commodities. But we don't have those real-time data on exports or imports. So we cannot go simultaneously on both the time series. So it is very difficult to incorporate or build in these data. So we have requested Government of India to create such series, and all these government organizations should be in sync. Now, as a trade is also a resort for us. Like in case of onion, I said that whenever we have problem of plenty, we go for trade. But ma'am has mentioned that SPS is the biggest issue in livestock as well as in most of the crop related exports. So trade can be a very good resort for price stabilization, but we should be able to meet all those food safety requirements and all those obligations kind of thing. But trade is actually very critical in terms of, its impact on price transmission and as a result for price stabilization. But we need to have the data on the relevant parameters.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Raka ma'am, we have specific questions for you now. The first question is how to bring in qualitative information in model building for price forecasting.
Okay. Yeah, this is again a very important thing, like, qualitative building of qualitative information. Now, what kind of qualitative information do we really need to build in? So what we did, we tried to incorporate that qualitative information, the perception of farmers, traders, and other stakeholders, because, model many times will not give you a kind of reliable or real picture. So we need to capture the stakeholders' perception also into our that forecast figure. So there we had 2-3 stages. In stage 1, we had this model-based forecast. In stage 2, we validated those model-based forecasts with the stakeholder perception. So that's how we incorporated the qualitative information into our modeling framework, and we converged both the information and tried to build more reliable, more robust kind of forecast.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Next question is how market intelligence efforts could be made more stringent.
Yes, actually, now here comes the role of both the central and state governments. So when we talk about this, making these efforts more effective and more efficient, institutions like ours, like we implemented one project, and now you are implementing this project. So institutions like us, which are more academic and R&D in nature, so we implement a project for a given period of time. But institutions, central government institutions and state government institutions, they are permanent in nature. So we should have market intelligence units both at central level and state government level. And this role of capacity building should be played by these R&D institutions, like NCAP, NIAP can play this role, AU can play this role. So capacity building should be done by this, and ultimately these intelligence units should function in both central governments and state governments, and they should be liaising with the state and centers to have more effective implementation of government programs and schemes. Ultimately, that kind of model will prevail because we will run project only for a limited time, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the line. And after that, what is the fate of that project? So that should be linked with the state government efforts.
Thank you, ma'am. How the institutionalization of market intelligence can be done in long run?
Yes,
that is another question for you.
The answer to the previous question, it encompasses this dimension.
Yeah. Okay, so which commodities, I think that is also you reflected in your presentation, which commodities hold more significance from the perspective of market intelligence? So as you told that.
Yeah, see, we need to identify where this volatility is very high. The commodities with a stable kind of price weaver don't need much effort in terms of market intelligence. Like we know maize. Maize is a commodity which has very stable kind of price regime, or cereals like rice or wheat, very stable kind of pattern. So there we don't need much effort in terms of market intelligence, but high value commodities, particularly horticultural commodities, plantation are actually very sensitive because the price is almost 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 per kg. So slight variation, slight change in price is actually very, very yielding or disyielding for the farmer. So like, the Kerala Agriculture University, they selected 2-3 major high value commodities, areca nut, pepper and cardamom. So they were doing the price forecasting for this. So the efforts, we were very extremely careful in forecasting the prices of these commodities because slight variation, if the commodity is 1,000 rupees per kg, 20% variation means loss of 200% or gain of 200%. So, there we need to be highly careful, but the efforts obviously will be very important in such case of those sensitive commodities.
Then, ma'am, I have 2 questions from my side for both of you. So I'll first be talking to Smita, ma'am. And my question is, see, ma'am, we are trying to develop the models wherein we can assess the market potential and competitiveness for the crops as well as livestock products. So in that one, we are trying to find out the market diversification. As you said, that India needs to look at the new markets, because concentration is not at all a good thing when situations turn otherwise around. So in that event, we would definitely like to know from you, uh, probably through this time, or we can share it later also, the kind of specific works that have been carried in the European Union related to the market diversification, and what is your take on that? Should that be done? Is that possible with the kind of data that we have in case of animal products?
Good question, Ritambra. See, as far as market diversification is concerned, uh, we have KU Leuven here, which is doing, a lot of, I would like to share with you at some point of time, maybe for the benefit of the agribusiness management students. KU Leuven has a very strong department of agribusiness, and they are also, some of the top researchers. They belong to KU Leuven in this. So it will be my pleasure to share that. And in case, I can also facilitate some kind of an exchange program at some point of time with KU Leuven for during rest of my tenure. That would be good. Now, coming to specifically that, what kind of modeling exercises they have done. Surely they have a much richer source of data. And as in fact, Raka was pointing out, this weekly data, this monthly data, which we do not have access to, they have such kind of a data. But all said and done, we tried some kind of models when I was in India. We were the kind of work which we did for modeling as far as livestock products is concerned. We still went for the annual data, and with the annual data also, we were able to come up. We used some smart model from World Bank. That is the table which I shared was Mandal and mine. That was, we used the smart model. Of course, that is the partial equilibrium model. But I would still suggest that in case of animal source foods or animal foods, partial equilibrium model will be fine, because with the general equilibrium, the proportion of animal food is so small in the entire basket that with the general equilibrium model, you will not be able to capture that. So it would be advisable that you can still go for the partial equilibrium model as far as the smart model is concerned, or even, intense kind of econometric regression modeling, which we did in some other studies. So we can share some of those studies where we can work out the, where we can play upon for each of the markets, rather than, coming up the panel data regressions using high advanced techniques in panel data regressions, where again we can go for market specific elasticities, etc., rather than going in for, a uniform elasticities across the market. So that is something which is doable with the available data which we have.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That was really a good insight. Raka, ma'am, there is this puzzle that bothers me every time regarding top commodities. So we have so much of, we have already created models and we are still trying to figure out the best, but the commodities remain notorious, the policy implications, and also where do you see it actually? How can we balance this all out?
Yeah, actually, top are actually very sensitive commodities. And when we look at the data in terms of, the historical time series data and very recent time data, we get only the arrival and price data. We don't have any other data. Neither we have data on climate. Then we don't have data on trade. So we cannot have, we cannot incorporate all kind of policy variables here. The shocks we cannot incorporate. So what we do, we only play with the price data, arrival data. Now we did try to do number of methodological innovations here. So like I mentioned in my presentation, that initially we were using those linear kind of modeling frameworks for that, ARIMA and its variants. But then later on, what we did, we combined both linear and non-linear kind of approaches to get better reliable forecast. So introduction of those non-linear kind of techniques could reduce the error in the forecast. So that we have been able to achieve, but that is not sufficient for top, particularly for top. So we need real-time data on other critical variables, like trade is one variable. Climate for a given market or for a given location is extremely important. So we should be able to build that climatic aberrations in the model, and because small aberration will affect entire supply chain and create those disturbances, and then that will not be able to capture the real information on prices and then ineffective forecast.
I think there is
Thank you
some
so much,
question.
ma'am.
Somebody has flagged a question on organic farming and produce. Do we have the data collection mechanism? Okay, let me just share with you that APIDA is working on this organic production data, and they do have access to some of this, how much is the area under organic production and how it is increasing. So if anybody is interested, most of this data, it's not in public domain as of now. It is not in the published form. But then if you approach these individual, state government organizations and then you can get access to some of this data on organic produce as far as India is concerned. But if somebody is interested in the data on organic produce in Europe, you are most welcome to contact me. I can share it with you. There is a lot of information which is available as far as demand, etc., and also production is concerned for organic produce. I have a question for, very quickly, I have a very quick question for Raka. Raka, you were mentioning that most of these forecast model were basically till 2016 and all. Now, when after that, in after 2017, pulses prices have dropped very substantially. So have you ever tried that? How does your forecast, how did your model work when we came to these pulses prices post 2017?
No, we did not actually try it for 2017 prices. But during that 2016 period, when there was a sudden decline in the prices, so the pulse forecasts were not very good. The reliability coefficient was around 70 to 80% only. So error was quite high during that spell, but we did not try after 2017.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It has been really a wonderful experience with both of you having on board with us. Today, we really learned a lot regarding the export part of the animal origin products and the true incorporations of price volatility component in the modeling exercises for forecasting. It is always a pleasure, Smita ma'am. I really have seen you after so many years, and thank you so much that being a woman, it always gives immense pleasure to see two of you sitting at that position and giving the direction to all of us. Thank you so much. I believe that the audience has been immensely benefited today. So on behalf of NAHEP-CAAST and my entire team, Dr. R.S. Punit PI, I thank both of you a lot. Thanks to you, the audience. You make us. And please stay with us for tomorrow too. We'll be catching up with you tomorrow sharp 10 a.m. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.